Saturday now. I had to go into work twice this week, so I didn't get too much done during the week. But my aim this weekend is hopefully go for a motorbike ride at some point. And I want to get the Riley running again. So I'm going through sorting out the gauges, controls, that kind of thing. I 3D printed a blanking plate for inside the tachometer, and also there's a plate that goes on the back. That's where a clock would normally go. I don't need the clock, I've got one over there. It didn't come with a clock anyway, but that just seals it up so no dust will get in. And there isn't a gaping hole in the middle of the gauge. I have hooked up the choke cable, and I realized that when it's a bit dark actually. Let's open the door. It's a bit of a grim morning. It's meant to clear up, we'll see. But everything's surface rusting. I'd realized I hadn't drilled the hole in the firewall for the choke cable, so you can see that coming along there. I need to make this fuel hose a little bit longer, I think. I don't want it rubbing on there. This is at this angle because if I turn it round it's too tight and it kinks the hose. So these are all my temporary wires as well. I will redo those to put the wiring actually on the correct switch. This one. So this switch is fuel pump and ignition, and you can shut them both off at the same time or leave one running. So the choke is hooked in. Drilling this hole was a little bit tricky. I didn't want to take all of this apart, so I had to use an angle drill. I was just able to get in here with a very small drill bit to drill through. Once I was able to drill through, I was able to drill through from the other side. I remembered that these sides come off, but now I've got these bottom parts of the bonnet sides in place. You have to take those off to get these off. So it all becomes a sequence of events to take things apart. You can do it, but just for doing that, it was easy enough just to whack the holes through. So the choke is in place. And then the next thing is the tachometer drive, which comes off the back of the camshaft down there. Don't even know if you can see it. So the cable screws on the end of that, and the problem is the end of the camshaft has a little slot in it, and there was a little piece of metal that I'd made, and I couldn't remember making this, but it seems to be missing. I remember at one point looking at it thinking, I might lose that, I should put it somewhere safe, and I don't know where that is. So I ended up having to make another one, which was tricky because I had to measure everything in the car. The way this works is this goes into the end of the camshaft, and then there's this little brass hat that I made that kind of goes on the end of that, and then all of that goes up inside the little screw thing. So the one I'm actually using is I think it's this one. So this screws on the end of the camshaft with that as a kind of washer spacer on the end, and you can see this is a square drive, and then that engages with this, which engages with the end of the cam. So I'm pretty sure I'd made this before and I'd lost it. I have no idea where it's gone. I don't know how it would have fallen out, but so I spent the last couple of nights making another one, just a piece of steel, milled the little dog on the end. The square drive is interesting, and I was thinking, do I need to drill a hole and then square file it out with a tiny file? And I thought, well, what would have I done last time? And I realized what I would have done last time is bought some brass tube, square tube, and used that. And indeed, I went through my little box of brass bits, and yes, I found the tube, so I'm pretty sure that's what I'd done last time. And luckily, this K&S tube, so this is common to anyone who does model aircraft, things like that, is the exact right size to fit on that square drive. So all I ended up doing was drilling a hole in the steel, which is the same diameter as the diagonal size of this tube, and then I was able to sort of push that into that hole, and I've actually Loctited that in with this Loctite 660, which is a retaining compound. It's quite expensive, this stuff. You can tell because it comes in a tiny little tube. But this is meant to be really good at repairing broken splines, loose bearings, those kind of things. So I have used that to hold that square tube in place. If anything ever jams up, maybe that'll share and it'll just spin in there. I'm not sure. And then I just blacken this just to give it a bit of corrosion protection. It's all been soaking in lanolin, so hopefully that's soaked into the surface. Chemical blacking like this gun bluing, that's what I'm going to have to do on the car. There are an awful lot of nuts and bolts and things that are just bare steel, so like these shackle pins. So what I'm going to do is when I strip the car down for painting, I'm going to de-rust all of these, and I'll probably put them through that chemical blackening to give them a little bit of corrosion protection. Otherwise they just surface rust like this. They'll all be high tensile steel, of course. So hopefully this means I can now wire up my tachometer, because I haven't actually tested that tachometer. And I think what I will do is, I've never run the car with water in the cooling system, so I might as well test that as well. I will plumb in the temperature gauge, and don't need to wire in the starter, don't need lights or anything like that. So I've got choke, I'll have ignition and fuel temporarily wired to the switch, tachometer, speedometer. Speedometer on this is weird because it's driven off the torque tube, it comes off there, and this is how the drive cable goes. It just kind of sits in the way. So I suppose you could extend this floor. You never sort of step here. So what I need to do is make sure it's up out of the way here. So I'll probably put a little P-clip or something there, because you don't want to get that caught up with your throttle foot. Rear guards are in place. I still need to make the back things, but I don't need those to be able to run the car. And I might as well put the battery back in its proper place, which is at the rear here. It'll be interesting when it comes to inspecting the car, because that is where they went. This is factory. But this compartment is the same compartment as the fuel tank, and there are rules around that, but of course it says they can vary the rules for vintage cars. It's not a sealed compartment because you've got the great bloody holes in the side for the axle. I guess worst comes to worst, they tell me I have to put the battery inside a box, which will be a pain, but I think what I would end up doing then is, this is the battery, I would have to get one of those plastic cases and put a smaller modern battery in there, because there's nowhere else to put it. I mean, you're not gonna, I suppose you could fit a small modern one up in here somewhere, but that's not how they were, so that's not what I want to do. Hopefully it'll be fine. I mean, Austin 7s from the factory, you know, the battery is sitting on the scuttle up at the top here, right next to the fuel tank. Not on this car, but I'm trying to think how it was on my Chummy. Can't actually remember now. So water pump is in there. Like I say, I've never tried it. So we might as well fill all of that up, see what leaks. So yeah, I need to redo these wires to get them into the dashboard, and then hopefully we can get it running and drivable. I have driven it before. I drove it when it was a bare chassis basically, and temporarily hooked everything up, no seat or anything, and drove around the garden. I should try and find that film. It'll be quite interesting to see what the garden looks like, because that was a couple of years ago and everything's grown up since then. But we're getting there. It's almost a complete car now. There's not too much to do. The wiring will be a big job. Even though there isn't a lot of wiring on a car like this, wiring is always it takes a long time to do it properly and to do it neatly and get everything absolutely right. I've got a lot of experience doing wiring. I as a student, even when I was in high school, I always had jobs after school doing electronics type stuff. I've done a load of electronics assembly in my time, and you know, electrical stuff, wiring, that kind of thing. So I don't have any problem doing it and doing it properly, but I just know that doing it properly takes a long time. I want to get everything nice and neat and tidy. For the headlamps have these little connectors on the back. Again, that's kind of original, but I might actually change that because I'm not sure I've quite got enough room there. You can see everything's very tight, very close to the guard stays. I could redo the guard stays, I guess, but I don't want to do that. So these connectors aren't very good. They're modern reproductions. They seem very loose to me. So I'm actually thinking of ditching those and just having a grommet there and running the cables straight in, because it's one less point of failure, and I will have the connectors down hidden inside the chassis rails or something, so you can disconnect the lamps from the wiring loom. Where is that connector? This is it here. It's like a bayonet fitting. These need to be soldered, I think, but they're just not very good. They're nice enough, but I don't know. Headlamps are one of those things where you want as few points of failure as possible. But we'll get to that when we get to the wiring. There's bits of stuff for the wiring loom all over the place. That's for the horn. I should probably bolt that on. But yeah, tachometer. Let's get that in place, and I'll be able to see if that works. I have the bonnet off the car just to make it easier to work on. One of the side panels. I did get it. It is running. I had to reprime the fuel pump. This is like a puller SU pump, but I think because my fuel tank is really quite low at the moment, it's running on the reserve. It couldn't quite start sucking the fuel through, so I ended up having to prime the pump. What I do is I take this hose off and put a piece of clear hose on the outlet pipe and let that gravity fill the fuel pump, and then it was fine. It was able to pump. Typical SU, it ticks every so often. I had to unstick the float needles in these because they haven't been run for a while. It's got the little tickler valves on there, and you kind of use that, and you'll see when petrol comes out of those, you know that the float bowls are full. I had to undo my tachometer cable, pull that out in order to get the water temperature one in. That's leaking. I think it's missing a seal at the back there, so that's dripping a little bit, but that's fine. I don't think it's registered anything yet. My tachometer isn't working. The drive cable is. I've unscrewed it from the back of the gauge, and that is rotating, and it is going the right way. So I need to check what's happened to the gauge. It may have been when I was adding that blanking plate, I've knocked something or broken something. Hopefully that's an easy fix. My battery's in here. I've got the jumper leads going to it. Mainly that battery cable does go, and it is connected to the battery, but I haven't got an engine earth on it yet. It should... I think it'll be earthed. It's not going to be earthed through the engine mounts because they go through rubber cones. So I'm definitely dripping some water. But I didn't want to risk it, so I've hooked it straight to the engine block, the earth. I don't want to earth it through any cables. And what else? I filled it up with water for the first time. My radiator had slipped back, so the position of this filler neck kind of depends on where you position the core, which is basically controlled by this hose. And this had slipped back, so I couldn't get the filler cap off. I may need a slightly longer piece of hose there just to tip the core forward so I can get into there. I hadn't actually done up any of the hose clamps, so I started filling it up with water, and it all just poured out the bottom, which is why there's a giant puddle. And the other thing I've discovered is my throttle return springs. These ones are way too weak. I've shifted them over to try and stretch them a bit. Normally it's not a problem if you... That's the accelerator pedal. moves this forward, there's a big spring on here, goes through this linkage up to here to the carbs, but I think you can see it's not pulling these down enough, so I need much stronger springs here. You need those two springs anyway, because if this linkage ever comes loose, you've disconnected your throttle pedal from the throttle, and if these springs aren't strong enough, it won't close the butterflies. So that's an easy fix. I just need some shorter, stronger springs. There are no timing marks, so I'm not actually checking the timing. I had to remember which way around advance and retard is on the old lever there. So the way I've got it, you could wire this up different ways, or mechanically hook this up different ways. I've got that's fully retarded, up is fully advanced. I don't know what it actually is on the proper cars. I have got a later steering wheel center. I think it's marked on that which way round is which, but that's okay, either way works. It's hooked up to the battery. I don't have the starter button hooked up, that's up here, but I'm using a starter solenoid, a slightly more modern one with a button on it, so that I can start it. So it did start up fine. It needed a little bit of choke, bit of smoke came out of it when I first started it up, but that's fine. And now it should. Not sure if the water pump is pumping. I'm assuming it will be. Yep, there seems to be some water flow there. It's getting warm. Annoying, this isn't working. Oil pressure is good, 60 psi. It's the hand throttle. Oh, it's trying to move. This is the, you can see the idle's a bit high because of these springs. Oh no. This is the advance. You'll hear the engine mode change. Didn't want to risk clipping this back on with the gasket coming loose in case it got munched up in the works. There's plenty of oil around, so that's good. I don't know if that's leaking up that stud or under that cover, probably under the cover. The exhaust is hot, that's not surprising. I don't know how hot this gets. I am wondering if when I go to get it registered they'll have a problem with the pipe there. I really don't want to have to stick a guard over it. I think that looks stupid on a vintage car. You know, the Cobra type side exhaust perforated steel. I suppose if I had to, I would put an aluminium cover over it, just like a plain flat piece to hide it. I mean, it's not hot. The other thing I can do is probably wrap it. That may be enough for them. Yeah, it stops you burning yourself on the pipe, so I might need more of that wrap. Brooklands exhaust. Does it really make a difference? Let's see. Bit of stuff burning off the exhaust. Nothing's registering on my water temperature gauge. That does work. I did test it, but that was quite some time ago. So hopefully that does work. It's definitely, oh, it's leaking. What's leaking? I can't tell if that's just this. No, it looks like it's, oh no, it's because the water's expanding. It's coming over the top. I hope. Yeah. It's surging. Where did I put the radiator cap? It's over there. It's a non-pressurized water system. So, this is the cap. I'm just running clean water at the moment. I haven't got any coolant in there, any antifreeze rather. I don't need antifreeze here necessarily, but it'll be good for the anti-corrosion. This is the overflow pipe, which I can't reach. Overflow. If I ever take this on a racetrack, I probably need to run that to a little catch tank. At the moment it just drops down. I think a lot of racetracks, I think they don't let you run coolant, is that correct? I think they prefer just plain water, so if it does go on the track it's not slippery. I don't know, not really into racing. Kind of rubber mounted, so it can move. Once the bonnet is in place, it locks it in place. Well, I wonder if I should drive it. Should we take it around the garden? The whole point of this exercise is because I want to get it back up on the hoist but it's hard to push because there's nothing really solid to push on. I suppose you can push on the chassis rails. Usually when I've moved it before, I've done it by rolling the tires, which is the easiest way, but that doesn't work when it's got guards in place. Yeah, I think we'll give this a try, which means I need to go change my shoes because I cannot drive it with boots on. You need very narrow shoes to be able to drive it. So let's see, look at that. The water pump's leaking, which is good because I did have that issue with the seal. I had to remake that seal. I remade it in Teflon. I think it's just dripping from this. So this is the capillary tube for that temperature gauge. I need to get my little temperature gun and we'll see what it's doing. Yeah, it hasn't moved. Okay, I'll get set up to see if we can drive this thing. Changed into my shoes. These are Puma Speed Cats. They seem to come and go, and they're often branded, like you'll get BMW ones or Ferrari ones. I don't want those, but these are really nice narrow flat-soled shoes. They're kind of meant to be modelled on racing shoes apparently. But let's get this running again. Discovered a problem already, which is I need to hook up my oil line, otherwise that's going to get caught in the clutch. Yeah, the routing all the cables and things is a bit of a pain. My tachometer drive cable is far too long, so that could be one of the reasons it's not working, but I suspect it might be more to do with the gauge. But let's get that oil gauge line up out of the way. Okay, everything's temporarily held in place with these little Velcro ties, which work well. So, your ignition. Seem to work. I didn't think this through about how I'm going to attach the camera, oh, that's the clutch. Actually, yeah, that I may need to be some adjustment or something on the clutch. That's going to be a pain in the neck. It did seem a little bit hard to get it into first. The pattern on this is interesting as well. So that's first, second, third, fourth. It's kind of reverse. That's the reverse cutout lockout. Let's hook this camera up. what can we do? I do have an oil leak from somewhere. It's not. Oh, yeah, back in the sun. I have been wondering if it's going to leak out of this tachometer drive, which is coming loose. Water is still leaking. Okay, we'll just try and do a lap. I'm not going to go mad. Okay, well, it goes. Driving around reminded me of all the things that aren't actually bolted in place yet, but I'm happy at how stable the front guards are. They're not flopping around all over the place. Generally seems to go. I think clutch might need a little bit of a look at. My water temperature gauge still isn't working. I think the speedo was working. It's a chronometric speedo, so it ticks, but I wasn't going fast enough. I only just managed to move the needle to probably about 5 miles an hour. Water temperature gauge isn't working. That's what I'm worried about at the moment. I don't want to overheat it. Radiator's hot. Exhaust is hot. Seems to be firing on all its cylinders. It's not leaking too much at the top end. Hard to tell. I think it might be leaking because that seal gasket is sitting on that washer. I need to check underneath it, see what's leaking there. Could just be the oil filler isn't up hard. Yeah. Oh, that's annoying about the water temperature gauge, and annoying about the tachometer, which isn't working. It's definitely coming up to temperature. Cold. It's running 65 psi, something like that. Now it's running 50, I think, when it's warmed up a bit. Let's see. Playing with the advanced retard. PSI. Yeah, that leak is the water temperature sender. Might need to send that gauge off for repair, I'm not sure. Yeah, what else? Tachometer, that's the most annoying thing. That's not working. I need to figure that one out. But given that works, I'll clean up my mess here. I'm going to move the motorbikes. I'm going to get the MG down, get it back over that side ready to take for its warrant, and get the Riley back in here. So a little bit of shuffling around. Just lining it up on the ramp. Should be okay if I go straight back. And I have got the gauge working, the tachometer, so that's good. Actually, I can see Head Gardener in the garden. I might get her to come over and guide me, although she's not very mechanically inclined, so it might be better on my own. But it's good that the rev counter works. I just hadn't put the little dog fully engaged with the end of the cam. So I'm very pleased the rev counter works. Very annoyed the water temperature thing isn't working. I wonder if that capillary tube is broken. It's been sitting around for years. It definitely did work at one point. I know, I tested it, but yeah, I think that's the only place that's leaking water. So that might need fixing anyway. That's probably do up a bit tighter, but I'm pretty sure the water pump's working, so I'm pretty sure the cooling is working. Oh, I forgot, this is a lift, which means we can check for small dogs, head gardeners, things like that. No, we're all clear. enough. Yep. Like I say, I was about my second lap of the garden and I remembered nothing's actually bolted down. I don't think the body's actually bolted to the chassis properly. It's just sitting with the bolts through the holes. But it didn't fall off, so that's good. This you can see. So this is where my leak is. That's the water. Pretty sure it's from that temperature sender. Yeah, I need to see what's going on here. That's the what do you call it? It's like the regulator for setting the oil pressure. It should be all bolted on there, like that. Yeah, this is a blanking plug. I don't think that's leaking. Might be a little bit of a leak here. Bottom of the water pump. These hose clamps weren't done up tight, so when I started filling it with water, it all just poured out. So yeah, there's water dripping down onto the dynamo. That's what this is. I should actually hook up those wires and see if the dynamo is charging. May need to reflash that. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that's leaking from the filler, not from any of the hoses. No, I think that was pretty good. Up under the tail. Diff is leaking as well, so it's pulled under here, which is good. I can see where it's leaked, not huge amounts, but enough to be annoying. Again, everything's loose. Really shows off the flat under tray. These bolts aren't done up, there's no nuts on those, so I'm actually amazed I didn't lose any of those. There's no nuts, but there's wooden pieces in there with T-nuts. So these are screwed into those T-nuts. Well, I hope they are. That's why I didn't lose any of those. Don't know about that Brooklands exhaust or not. It doesn't really change the sound that much. I like the look of it, but I have heard they rob power, and you don't have a lot of power to start with, so you probably don't want that. Yeah, I need to see what's leaking around the sump there. Probably will just need snipping up because it hasn't actually been run many times to get up to temperature. There's the oil filter. That's a modification, so there's weeps of oil everywhere. Rust proofing, that's what we call it. Except this is all aluminium. That's good. But yeah, driving it, driving the MG after driving this thing, like that just feels so refined, so light, so easy to drive. This is quite awkward. The steering wheel is so big, I'm not huge, but basically it rubs on my thigh here almost. On your clutch leg, there's nowhere to put your clutch foot, so your foot is kind of hovering over the clutch pedal the whole time. Big wheels, so it's heavy. I was only going slowly around the garden, of course. And this is a small vintage car, so this isn't a big car by any stretch of the imagination. But it really makes you have a better appreciation for these people who raced these around Brooklands back in the day at sort of 70, 80 mile an hour for 6 hours on a very bumpy track, with giant Bentleys and things screaming past you. So there's that famous crash at Brooklands where someone in a Bentley goes right over the top. I think his name was Clive Dunphy, something like that. He got killed in that crash. But just before that crash in the footage, you can actually see him overtaking a Riley Brooklands, and it looks tiny as this massive Bentley goes past it. But, no, I think we'll call that successful. So what do I need to do now? Get it back down, probably. I might wipe the bottom of the engine down while I'm here and just tighten up all those bolts and things. Rear guard stay, that last stay for the guards. And then hopefully there's enough there that I can take it now for its inspection. I need to do the little aluminium thing for the screen. I briefly managed to look in the mirrors. They weren't rattling around too badly. The front guards, I'm really pleased that the front guards were not flopping around all over the place. It's not exactly smooth around the garden, so hopefully on the road they'll be a lot better, but they were barely moving. The headlamps were jiggling around, but they're not bolted on. Again, they're just sitting there. So, getting very close. Seems to start well, especially when it's warm. It doesn't fire right up, but it fires the first press on the starter, but it seems to take it a few revolutions to get up to speed, and I suspect that's because of the magneto, maybe, that it just takes a couple of revolutions to get the magneto up to speed so it'll spark. Not sure, but no, very successful. Car's back up on the hoist. I may need to get a slightly different size hose for this one that goes between the bottom of the water pump and the bottom of the radiator. It was leaking, just sort of started leaking, so I tightened up the hose clamps, but you can see the diameter that's on the water pump outlet. Was it an inlet? I guess it's an inlet for the pump. It's much smaller diameter than the hose, so I may need a different size hose there. We'll see. I've stopped it leaking now, so that's good. I actually stopped the water temperature gauge leaking by just nipping that up, but it still doesn't work, so it's a bit of a problem. I do have another gauge that I can put in, another mechanical gauge just to use in its place, just so there's something there, but that's a modern gauge, so I'd prefer a proper vintage type one. The number I wrote on the oil filter is, I think it's February 2022, so it's been a little while, 22 or 23, a little while since I put that oil filter on there. Obviously the car hasn't had much running. And the other thing I got recently, I think I mentioned the difficulty in getting a long necked hammer, and there was one on Trade Me, and I did bid on that, but it ended up going for $70 odd, I think, for a second hand one. But I actually discovered there is one on Trade Me that you can buy a new one. It was just hard to find because the picture they had of it was end on like that, not side on. So unless you clicked into that actual item and then scrolled through the pictures, you didn't see it, that it was a longer head one. So I ended up just buying one of those new, and again that was $70, I think. So that should be on the way, which will be good for finishing, smoothing off the guards. Look at it. It's looking okay, I think.